Hi, I'm Anna Olsen here on A1R Psychic Radio Network. I have my show, Insights into Consciousness, my segment every week here. Tuesdays, 1:30 Pacific Standard Time, 4:30 Eastern Standard Time. We air live worldwide, and today I'm going to do a lesson on something that people don't talk about very much. And usually when people don't talk about something very much, people don't know a whole lot about it. So I would like to shine a little light on a topic that can be a little bit controversial, and it can make people feel a little bit uncomfortable. And the topic today is evil. You know, there are a lot of different ways that people say that someone or something is evil. And there are lots of different definitions for different people concerning evil. And so I wanted to go into the psychological explanation for evil, because I think the more education we have on why somebody behaves the way they do, the more insights we can have, the more sense we can make out of it, and the more that we can protect ourselves from harm. So I'm always talking to the people that I work with about protection and really keeping yourself safe and who you can and can't trust. I want to make sure that my clients and the people who are close to me, I want them to know that they can trust me. I want to always enlighten them on a lot of the things that I learned just doing readings. Just doing readings, I've come across probably every personality type you could imagine, with how many people I talk to about very personal things that aren't shared with anyone else and that never leave our confidence. So I wanted to just put together this little spiel that I have to just get to the very tip of the iceberg on what we know about psychology's definition of evil or evil personalities. So traditionally, evil has been associated with Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. This is called the dark triad. I will go into those definitions a little bit later, and I'm going to make it really simple as possible. Basically, that's according to Psychology Today, that dark triad. Now, researchers at the University of Copenhagen ID'd 9 traits of something called the dark core, or D factor. Now, this is a dynamic of evil personalities, and they are egoism, Machiavellianism. I'll go into these words later. I know these are a little bit weird. Moral disengagement, narcissism, psychological entitlement, psychopathy, sadism, self-interest, and spitefulness. Now, I know that was like a mouthful. That's 9 different things. I'm going to go into a quick definition of each, just so that we know what in the heck we're talking about, okay? These are kind of like psychological terms. So, egoism, theory that treats self-interest as the foundation for morality. Machiavellianism, that's that big one. Cunning, scheming, and unscrupulous, especially in politics or advancing one's own career. Moral disengagement, distancing oneself from normal or ethical standards due to perception of justification of those behaviors. Narcissism, extreme selfishness or excessive interest in oneself. Okay, then we have psychological entitlement, which is the belief that one deserves or is entitled to more than others. So they think they deserve all of the everything. And then there's psychopathy, which is an impaired empathy and remorse and bold, disinhibited, and egotistical trait or traits. Sadism. These people derive pleasure and gratification from inflicting pain on or humiliating others. Self-interest, worried or concerned solely for one's own needs exclusively. Spitefulness, revengeful. They're revengeful, vindictive, and they have a desire to inflict a wrong or an injury on someone, usually in return for one received. So people want to get back at you, right? Okay, so now that we kind of have a generalized definition of these different terms, we know that people can be very high functioning. Now, this is the thing where people get thrown off. People can be very high functioning, hold a day job, have a family, hold a political office, be a priest, rabbi, pastor, bishop, psychic reader, teacher, or stay-at-home mom, and still score very high on the dark D factor, evil personality spectrum. Now we're going to go into this a little bit more, but this is definitely a personality spectrum where people can have some traits but not all, or all traits and be really bad. So when we're talking about bad, we're talking about dangerous to you. And this is where I'm wanting to just educate people on this so that you can defend yourself, your family, and those you love from people who are like this, because they're very cunning, manipulative, and deceiving. They can throw almost anyone off, and they can get into your most vulnerable states and take advantage of you very, very easily. How does University of Copenhagen's researchers summarize how to identify if someone has proclivity to the dark D core traits? Well, those are the traits that I just went over. Basically and simply using a minuscule section of the extensive research, which is lengthy, quote, the general tendency to maximize one's individual utility, disregarding, accepting, or malevolently provoking disutility for others, accompanied by beliefs that serve as justifications. To explain a little bit, maximizing one's individual utility is also known as selfish behavior, or all for their own gain. Disregarding, accepting, or malevolently provoking disutility for others, or in other words, while they do things for their own gain, they do it in just totally regardless of how it negatively affects others, or to negatively affect others intentionally, on purpose. Finally, people who hold core beliefs to justify harming others for personal gain, they will do things such as commit fraud, they will cheat in relationships, passively allow harm or abuse, such as not warning you of danger, or just looking the other way. And I want to put a big emphasis on looking the other way. There are so many people out there who will not take responsibility for something because they themselves didn't commit the crime or commit the abuse or the infliction of pain. And what I want to look at is that somebody can be just as guilty, if not more guilty, for looking the other way, pretending they didn't see it, ignoring it, putting their head in the sand, okay? They may orchestrate a chain of events that lead to serious life-altering devastation in someone's life, or cause the physical harm or death of others. As a disclaimer, someone exhibits these traits as a response to being harmed occasionally. Okay, so doesn't mean you're an evil psychopath, okay? So basically, typically people feel spiteful if someone has wronged them, okay? This doesn't mean that if you have normal human reactions to somebody doing you wrong, that you are on the dark core triad or you're some psychopath or whatever. Okay, so part of these behaviors is normal. We're talking about an extensive, just like somebody doing this extensively to an extreme. It's kind of like who they are and what they do, or they're not even provoked at all and they just do this. Okay, they derive pleasure, or they love to kind of step over others to make themselves better, richer, more famous, etc. Okay, so this dark core factor of behaviors, they apply to the daily or extreme. So this means people fall on a normal, low, medium, or high factor personality spectrum, D core factor personality spectrum. So of course, this is a spectrum, goes from empty to full, okay, kind of like a gas tank gauge. If you think about, some people will have a few features of this, and it can go all the way up into like full-blown personality disorder, dangerous, all the way up to like serial killer, okay? So, I mean, there is a spectrum, and this is what is important for people to know, that most of these people, the reason why they hide so well is because they don't always run around yielding a knife and stabbing people, okay? And I hate to be so like violent about it, but you know, it's really just that a lot of them function very well. They have big smiles on their faces. They are very social, engaging, charming, but it seems kind of fake or glib the majority of the time, where you're kind of got this weird feeling about them and you're not really sure like what that's about. Okay, so it's really important that everybody realizes that. So how can you tell that someone has a dark core tendency? According to Scientific America, having just one of those 9 traits that we went over, okay, I'll go over them again, but it makes you more likely to have the other traits as well, again, on a spectrum. So how do you know how to change or call out these behaviors? Set limits with an adult with these dark core traits. Okay, the short answer is don't. Just don't deal with them, okay? Set boundaries, keep yourself safe, get away from them. I'm going to go over these again. If they have one, they're most likely going to have the other 9, especially if they have an issue with the impulsivity with just one of them. You're going to probably find them in the rest of their personality spectrum or traits. So, egoism, theory that treats self-interest as the foundation for morality. This is always hard for me to say. Machiavellianism, cunning, scheming, and unscrupulous, especially in politics or advancing one's career. Moral disengagement, distancing oneself from normal or ethical standards due to perception of justification of those behaviors. So here we have a justification on why this person stole or abused or hurt or harmed or did this, that, and the other. There's a justification. There's it's okay because. Narcissism, extreme selfishness, excessive interest in oneself. Psychological entitlement, belief that one deserves or is entitled to more than others are. They're more deserving. They need it more because there's always some reason why they deserve more than others. There's some victim in some way. Or they just deserve it more because they're special or they're better looking. Or, it's basically like self-obsessed, okay? Psychopathy, impaired empathy and remorse. They don't feel bad. They do not have a conscience or it's impaired, okay? And bold, disinhibited, and egotistical traits. Bold, disinhibited, egotistical, self-absorbed. Sadism, derive pleasure and gratification from inflicting pain on or humiliating others. And then there's the self-interest, worried about, concerned solely for one's own needs exclusively. And then spitefulness, revengeful, vindictive, desire to inflict a wrong or injury on someone, usually in return for one received. These traits are hardwired from childhood, and a D-core factored individual was made this way with emotionally underdeveloped wiring due to genes, environment growing up, and trauma from a young age. There is nothing you can do other than limit contact to protect yourself and prevent abuse or harm. There is no known absolute to change it, even if that person wanted to, which according to the stats and all of the research, they don't. They don't inherently have the desire to change or to better themselves or to change their behaviors, since they typically do not have true remorse. As a matter of fact, the nicer you are to these individuals, the more understanding you try to be, and the more forgiving you are with these personalities, the bigger victim you look like and become to them. You will become more of a target the more you forgive, look the other way, and so the pattern goes. This is where niceness and forgiveness minus boundaries, okay, I'm talking about when you're not setting boundaries on them, becomes your defeat and your demise. If you try with them to better things and make things for the better, they will view you as deserving of how they treat you in response. If you allow it, you become weak or they can mow over you. They will think, this is the way their mind thinks, they assume you deserved it. It was your fault. And that's really the way they feel. Deep down, they cannot see it any other way, because to them, you deserved it for being weak, dismissive, allowing. That's why these people are so dangerous. Okay, so there are varying degrees, though, and this is where I kind of include like the spiritual part that I've been able to research and kind of come to some conclusions about, that there are varying degrees of these evils according to accountability. So I'm going to ask a question. Is a person with a 3-year-old mindset and emotional development going to be as accountable as someone with a 30-year-old emotional development mindset when displaying these behaviors? No, of course not. So again, these individuals can be high functioning, so they can be tough to crack. They can seem very mature. They can have very good intellectual abilities, such as they're good at their job, they're good at math, they're good at reading, writing, spelling, this, that, and the other. That is the intellectual IQ. We're talking about an EQ as well. Now, EQ, emotional intelligence, where they can kind of fake it, and they can say that they care about you. They can say that they love you. They can be the kindest person on the planet and love bomb you, okay? But they do not feel it deeply, and they will eventually turn on you. And I'm going to go into how to protect yourself and how to identify it early on, later on. So the ultimate question concerning spirituality is, how accountable is someone for these behaviors if they simply cannot feel remorse? This is a question of their literal capability to care, or even see reason to care. You can throw them in prison for years, and they will get out and just do it again. And then you can put them back into prison, and they will get out and they will just do it again. The reason why is because they do not have the remorse. They do not care that they hurt others. Okay, they want the quick way for instant gratification, and they can't really hold jobs for long periods of time. So to me, the lesson lies in identifying these behaviors in others, since it will come up eventually, even in small doses initially, okay? Then it multiplies or intensifies at a later date. So for every small behavior that can align with these factors, there are 50 other behaviors just like it, big or small. And the longer you're around someone, the more you get to know them, the more exposure you have to being around them, the more you are going to be able to identify these behaviors, because they will not be able to hide them over time. They will love bomb someone at first. They will have that image to fool people, to manipulate, and to get people on their side. And then they'll kind of pop up here and there, or all at once eventually, where there's actually a discard phase a lot of the time with these personalities. So once you identify the behavior, know you've just encountered a possibly full functioning adult who has the wiring emotionally of an infant, toddler, or child. Now it's time for adult daycare. Oftentimes, but not always, these D-core factor adults have reckless behavior, trouble with the law, or prison. They may have issues with substance abuse, like alcoholism. Do not discount alcoholism. And alcoholism is also very hard to spot at first as well. They may have difficulties in their relationships or holding down a job long term. And of course, there are dangers in diagnosing anything, because even a professional sometimes isn't sure of a diagnosis. And they'll have to get, second, third, and fourth opinions from different professionals to diagnose people. But we can identify a harmful behavior, and we can identify the behaviors. We can identify the signs initially in someone, and then immediately be on the lookout for more of these behaviors and set limits and boundaries accordingly. So I'm going to give you the recipe on how to do it without having to be a psychologist, a professional, have 1,000,000 degrees. This is a nice little recipe that you can follow. Okay, so this is a wiring in the brain development that is not reversible once someone hits adulthood. So it's hardwired once somebody hits adulthood. This is why it's so difficult to change it, especially with the lack of remorse. It's also sometimes traced to orphanages and infants failing to attach emotionally to their caregivers. So yes, daycare or high volume distance with infants from their primary caregivers absolutely contributes to these evil triad or 9-factored dark personalities. So keep your eyes open and stay safe out there, especially in today's dating world, where your life can be just one more file in a D-core factor person's arsenal. Now, when I say that, it's that many of these personalities, okay, they will have not just one person in their phone and their contacts, they have many. I don't know if you've ever heard of a narcissist's harem. And now you have to remember, too, that females can be narcissistic on this dark core traits list. So remember, it can look any way possible where people are just exhibiting these traits. Male, female, doesn't matter. So I'm going to talk about diagnosis and removal. And when I talk about diagnosis, I'm talking about don't have to have a degree, don't have to have a whole lot of experience with like treating these people. I'm going to teach you a little bit about how you can kind of seek out these different signs that this person may be trouble, may not be the investment, and to know exactly how to avoid harm. So you don't need to have a PhD to do this in your life. And first of all, you get to know someone very well before moving into big life commitments with them or to them. Now, I would say one of the biggest things that could really protect you is not to be very careful in preventing having children with people before you have gotten to know them, okay? Preventative measures. Get to know someone at least 1 year before huge life movements forward with them, no matter how loving or amazing they seem, because they will love bomb you, manipulate you, and get you to have children with them to trap you so that they can not just have manipulating tactics on you short term, for potential short term, but they will then have long-term control and manipulation of you if they can get you to have children with them quickly. Okay, that's one warning about these personalities. Secondly, look for mirrors of these behaviors in small ways. Remember, small behaviors don't get better over time. They just get worse or multiply. So for every one behavior you see, there's 50 you don't. And that just increases in intensity over time. Gets worse and worse. 3, do not fall for promises of change on seriously bad behaviors such as abuse. Okay, these are once done, you're done behaviors. So that's when you get out, you escape, and it's time for removal. Now, I'm going to liken this unto when you have, like, let's say that somebody goes to the doctor because they have something on their body, and it is like, let's say, a tumor or something that is dangerous, that is parasitic even, to their blood supply, or, it's dangerous, cancer or something like that. Would we leave it on and just let it grow and say, oh, well, that's just the nature of it. So I'm just, I feel bad for it. I feel bad for my tumor. So I'm just going to leave it. No, we don't do that. The reason why is because we know that we will have a long-term chance of demise and harm done to us. That's why we get to a doctor and we have something like that removed. Now, these personalities on a spectrum can go from very mild to very severe. And it's important that you get the attachment to these individuals broken early on, because what can happen is what I've seen with so many people that I work with whom I just adore, and they're just the sweetest people. They're usually, these empaths who really care for people. They can be basically very vulnerable to these dark personalities, these dark core personalities. And the dark core personality, the only intention that this person can have, even just in how they're wired and how they were developed, is to use and abuse somebody and to get what they want. They will hurt you. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And what they do is they manipulate people into a pattern of reward. So we know that when somebody goes to the casino, one of the reasons why they love going to the casino over and over and over again, and they get to where they're losing everything, including their house, and they still go to the casinos because they're hooked on the reward system. Now, these dark personalities definitely initiate this reward system in their behavior. They're very good at manipulating others. Usually their intelligence is actually pretty high if they can do this, especially for long term. They can have a high intelligence and a low emotional intelligence. They can have a high intellectual intelligence where they are very smart, geniuses even, but their emotionality is very, very stunted, very underdeveloped, even to the development stage of a toddler or an infant. Now, this is why I personally would not want to hurt somebody in this situation, and that's why I think the divine is the only true judge for this, because we cannot possibly judge a person dealing with something like this accurately. It is just impossible. It's hard enough for a professional in psychology to do it. So when these people get their hook into you, what they're doing is they're baiting you with a reward system emotionally and mentally. Whenever they reward you with a compliment, with telling you they love you, with giving you gifts or attention or time, what happens is you get hooked on the dopamine increase, and then they kind of duck out and they're gone, or they ghost you for a bit, or they kind of withdraw. And then you're constantly trying to get that one reward that you did have, and it becomes an addiction to a person. So that should be an absolute warning sign. When you see somebody coming in and grabbing you and then releasing and ghosting and being gone, and you're wondering and you're worried, and then they come back in and give you just a little bit of what you need, that is a sure sign you need to cut it immediately. And I've seen this with people who are married and the other person is married. These are affairs. These are dating situations. These are long-term marital relationships. These are parent-child relationships, okay? It's very important. Watch the show and listen more than once so that you can really get it ingrained on how to identify this so you can protect yourself. The best defense you have is to get them away from you and to put up your boundaries and your all your limits to any of these harmful behaviors so that you can be safe. Okay, this is pretty much the end of my time today. I was hoping to do a reading today, but it all went to the teaching material today. But I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you again next week. You can always reach me here, Facebook, Anna Olsen Intuitive. And you can also reach me through my website at annaolsenintuitive.com. That's at the bottom of the screen. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you very soon.